Welcome to Bakes and Blenders. I'm Colleen. Today we're going to be making some wafer paper ranunculus in two different sizes. Look how beautiful those are. Let's get started. Okay, to make our wafer paper ranunculus, we're going to need wafer paper, of course. I've got my craft punches, though I have used biscuit cutters to make a template to cut them out before. You need foam balls. I have two different sizes because today we're going to try making small ones and big ones. I like the rough ones. It gives the wafer paper something to grab onto. Scissors, paint brushes, a little bit of water, and it's nice to have piping gel around too in case you need it. Let's get started. Now to get started, we're just going to be punching out our circles. So I'm just going to take a sheet of wafer paper and punch out an entire sheet of 2-inch, 1.5 inch, and then 1-inch circles. We've got our stack, and I am just going to keep mine in a bag that is labeled as 2 inches, just so I know where they are. And now we're going to do our 1.5 inch punch. And there's our stack of 1.5 inch. And again, I'm just putting those in a labeled baggie to keep myself organized. And now we're going to do our 1 inch. Now I have some scraps from the other cutouts we did that weren't big enough for that size, so we're going to use our small 1 inch to get even more circles out. And got my bag look at all of these. Got a lot of these circles. Won't be cutting these out for a while, huh? Okay, got those. Okay, we're going to be working on our large wafer paper ranunculus. So I've got 9 1-inch circles, and I'm going to cut a slit about halfway up the discs. You can stack them 3 at a time. Any more than that and things could get a little wonky. Okay, now you can use water or wafer paper glue. Wafer paper glue is just shredded scraps of wafer paper mixed with water until it has a piping gel-like consistency. I like it a little bit more than water, but I do still use water on occasion. So you're just going to do a swipe over the slit and then pull the two sides together and pinch to make a cup. And then just set those aside to dry. And the further you cross your discs, the deeper the cup. Okay, set those aside to dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. Time to add our first layer of our small petals. We want these ones to be completely flush with the ball. The entire point of the first layer is just to cover up the ball. For the first layer, I usually do 4 petals. Now at this point it doesn't look like it's sticking to the ball. That's okay. As we build up with more layers of petals, everything will be just fine. So set this aside to dry for about 5 to 15 minutes. Okay, now we're gonna add the second layer of small petals. Now we want these petals to lift up just a little bit, whoops, in the center. Okay, set that aside to dry for another 5 to 15 minutes. Okay, time to make the petals for the, what is this, the second size, the medium size petals for our large ranunculus. Stack them 3 up and slice halfway up. And with water or wafer paper glue, swipe and cup. Set those aside to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. All right, we're going to add our next layer of petals. Okay, first level or first layer of the medium petals done. I'm going to set this aside to dry for a few minutes. Okay, time to add our second layer of medium petals. Set that aside to dry for 5 to 15 minutes. Okay, we're going to make our large petals for the large ranunculus. We've got our 2-inch circles here. Just gonna stack them 3 up and cut a slit halfway up. Get your wafer paper glue or some water, brush, and pinch. Okay, set those aside to dry. Okay, time to start adding our large petals. Try not to put your thumb on top of the flower. I've done that and it will just crush some of those petals up there. So try to pinch it around the sides while you're doing this. There's the first layer of the large flower, or large petals. We're gonna set this aside upside down to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. Time for our final layer of petals. There we go, all done. Now I've got this little bit where you can see the ball shining, coming through, so I'm gonna take a small 1-inch piece of wafer paper, a circle, and I'm going to tack it on right there, just because I don't want the ball to be exposed at all when we're placing this on a cake. Tap that down. And it's all finished. Let's set that aside to dry before we color it. Okay, so now we're gonna be making our smaller ranunculus. So I have a small ball. This one is 1 inch. And we're gonna be using, I already have cut out 1 inch and 1.5 inch circles. So I'm just gonna cut out a couple of these. I think this one's about 5/8 inch. And we don't need a ton, so I'm not going to do a full sheet. These are just scraps of wafer paper from other flowers, other projects. Okay, so I've got those, might need to cut more later. And just like with my other sizes, I am cutting out, or I'm sorry, I'm putting these into a bag for easy storage. Okay, and now I'm gonna cut a small slit halfway up these circles. And you wanna be careful because these are much smaller. Okay, and we're gonna set those aside to dry for about 5-10 minutes. Time to apply our first layer of the small circles. Okay, and set that aside to dry for, again, 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, now we're going to add the next layer of our small petals. And remember, we now want this layer to start peeking up a little bit. There you go. We're going to set that aside to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, we're done with our small petals. Now we need to make our medium petals. So I've got 9 1-inch circles here. And just like we did before, we're going to stack them up and cut a slit halfway up. Set aside to dry. Now we're ready to apply our first layer of medium petals. Alright, let's set that aside to dry. Time to add the second layer of medium petals. Okay, set that aside for 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, now we have our large petals. Stack them up and cut your slits. All right, and let those dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. And time to add our first layer of the large petals to our small ranunculus. All right, there we go. Let's set that aside to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, now we're going to apply the final layer of petals to our small wafer paper ranunculus. So I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to try putting the glue right onto my petal. See if that makes it any easier. There we go, our finished miniature wafer paper ranunculus. We're going to set that aside to dry for a bit before we dry dust it with some colored powder. Okay, we are going to color our wafer paper ranunculus. I've got some pink petal dust, and we'll do one of these in purple as well. I'll probably do more than that, but that's okay. Okay, so here's our ranunculus all dried. I like to concentrate the color in the center and then build up. Okay, now to add a little bit of interest, this is optional. You can take a second color with a stiff brush and kind of trim the edges of some of your petals. So I'm doing red since that seems to, blend really well with a pink flower. But you could use whatever color combos you want. Here's our first one. Now it's not very dark, but when you compare it to a white one, you can definitely see the difference. Don't they look so pretty? Now we're gonna add a little bit of gold coloring. Links to all of the products I use will be in the blog post, which will be, and a link to that will be in the description box below. Okay, so with the same tight brush, you want to take just a little bit and brush it over the edge of just every few petals. You see? There we go. All done. Place your wafer paper flowers onto your cake. You're just going to need a few things. Of course, you need your flowers, which I have all of mine right here. You're going to need some frosting in a piping bag, your cake stand, and of course, a freezing cold cake. My cake is still in the fridge, so I'm going to get that out and we'll get started. And I've also got my cake sketch that I'm using just to help me with placement. All right, so take your first flower and put a dollop of frosting right on the back. You can also put your frosting right onto the cake and then add your flour. Now on top it's a little bit easier because you can plan it out a little bit better. And there you go. It's that easy. Now I gotta put this in the fridge to chill some more. All right, now we're gonna add some gold embellishments. I've got my edible gold leaf here. I'm just gonna stick it right on.